Right, so here we go. This is the driver side that I sorted out a few months ago. The bolt that broke when we were in Belgium, coming back from Spa with a lot of luggage. And the bolt sheared because it was a soft as hell M10 going in a 7/16. That top tube there is a 7/16 tube. There's basically 1.65 millimeters of slop with an M10 bolt. This was incorrectly fitted by the previous mechanic. We've now got Bilsteins at the top as well, with much better rubber bushes top and bottom than the Avos that were fitted previously to try and solve the root cause of the problem, which were soft rear springs fitted by Morgan. Now, these are the much better anti-tramp rear springs, and they've got an extra leaf up the front and they have at the rear. So basically it acts as a trailing arm to locate the axle better. We've then fitted this fella down here, which I'll put my hand on so you can see it. And there's a rose joint there, but that bar going across, okay, and it goes all the way across with another rose joint at the other end there, so that goes all the way under the axle like that and all the way across here. That locates the whole rear axle, so there's no lateral movement anymore, which is obviously also putting a lot of stress on those damper mounts and the damper bolts and the dampers themselves. And with the untempered, horrible Indian sourced rear springs that Morgan were buying on the cheap, the whole lot was moving around just chronic, and everything was just like terrible handling and overstressed as well. So no wonder these bolts kept snapping, especially seeing they'd used the incorrect size, which is M10 instead of 7/16. So there was that 1.65 millimeters of slop. So now this has all been done correctly with high tensile 7/16 bolts that go very snugly in those top tubes. They go all the way through those and correctly through the Bilstein damper that, as I say, is a much better quality damper and has better quality rubber bushes instead of the Avo ones, which were kind of a silicon compound, a kind of a poly bush, bubblegum I call them, a bit rubbish. And then you can see here what I've done is the first nut, this one here, that goes up against the tube, that's actually a stove nut. So that's a deformed nut that acts as a locking nut, and you use them on stoves or anywhere where there's heat. I wanted to use those because those threads do tend to get a bit of grease on them, so nylocks aren't always the best. I think they work fine, nylock, but I've now degreased all the threads. I've used the stove nut as the first nut, and then I've used actually a nylock up against the stove nut, and I've pinched the two of them together to act as a jam nut. So the nylock is acting as a jam nut on the stove nut, which is a deformed nut, which is quite difficult to get onto the thread, but it's the right thread, so they will not come undone. The bolt is also longer than the M10 ones used as well, so I've got a bit of free length on the thread. So that is now all fixed. Now if we come over to the other side, this is the one that I replaced today, and I've done exactly the same thing. They're identical now on the driver's side and the passenger side. I really should have done them both at the same time, but I was just too lazy. So now we got much better springs, much better dampers, much better damper bushes, much better located rear axle because of the panhard rod and the anti-tramp rear springs, and we got these correct 7/16 bolts that fit snugly in the top tubes that are high tensile, that have also got a really good nut locking mechanism to stop them. Also finally I've used washers here. Originally Morgan used a kind of a packing thing, like a packing tube, but it was very thin wall tube that they'd used for this spacer, and much better now with washers. And also I could fine tune the length of those washers to create the right packing, so that the damper is in its correct working plane. So as the rear axle rises and falls, the damper is working in its correct plane. So the whole thing essentially is way better. I think I can actually make it better even still, and I'm going to get my welder to put some proper brackets in here that cage the back of the bolt as well, so that it's a proper wraparound bracket And also I think there's enough room here, you can see here, to lift the damper by a good 1.5 inches, now maybe 2 inches there, and that would give me 2 inches of additional travel. Now I've noticed that the damper starts to work around that point as well, so it would be a working damper with an extra 2 inches of travel on the suspension, because as you can see, the bump stop is really right on the damper. So currently the car is running on its bump stop, so on compression what you find is you're pretty much straight into bottoming out. You get a nice ride quality until you hit a big bump, especially at speed, and that's when it throws you out of your seat in the car, and the whole rear tyres, rear axle kind of lift off the ground, and you get this kind of speedboat effect where the revs of the engine go up and then come back down again. It's quite entertaining, but I think with an extra couple of inches of suspension travel there and some better brackets on the back, I can make this even better, and I can make the car ride better and handle better. So that will be the next modification. So I'll get Max at Max Spec Engineering to fabricate me some brackets, and we'll probably encage the damper, which will be a much stronger effort, because obviously that's just a bolt that goes through, so it's only really kind of clamping and holding on one side. So if we can properly encage that top mounting for the rear damper and lift that mounting point up by 2 inches without interfering with the board, we should be giving the car a better ride, and stop that kind of bottoming out and hard sort of pounding of the bump stop. So there it is. That's the intricacies of Monty the Morgan's rear suspension, some of the history behind why it didn't really work properly when I got the car, and what I've done to kind of fix it up until this point. I think, like I say, I can make it even better, but as it stands, I can't see these high tensile 7/16 bolts snapping like those dreadful soft and too small M10 ones were. So yeah, all fixed and ready for Castle Combe track day on Friday next week. Thanks for watching.